Hi there, I'm Shauna Warner with Natural Awakenings Magazine in Oklahoma, and you have joined us in Conversations with, where we get to talk with people throughout the state of Oklahoma in the health and wellness field. And today we're excited to be joined by Lee Ancrum, the founder of the Ancrum Institute in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Shauna.
So, it's back to school time. We're just going to jump right in here because I know that parents and families are dealing with so many issues, as they head back to school, whether they're dealing with immunity issues and school functions and just everything that's happening. And sometimes, as we're getting our kids involved in sports, there's another issue that families might not be thinking of, but I think it's really important to talk about. So I was excited to find out that we were going to talk about concussions. And I know that most of the time I've heard about people having concussions like boxers. They get clocked in the head and they have a concussion. But we're going to talk about concussions and dealing with our children as we're going back to school. So let's just jump right in, Lee. What do you think's going on? How susceptible do you think our kiddos are? There's just so many questions. I'm going to let you talk. Let's talk about
Okay.
concussions.
All right. So let's talk about concussion. So, I see lots of children of all ages in school who are participating in sports having concussions. One, of course, the one that we all think of is football.
Yeah.
So, even though they've got a helmet on, that force that they hit each other with and that is going on, especially when they get to tackle football, that really you can really have concussions happen even when they're wearing a helmet. So you really want to know that. Now, the concussion understand this, is that when you have a head hit and the brain actually hits, just like in a car accident, whiplash, the brain actually hits on one side of the brain and then actually goes back and hits on the other. So it's not like you're just getting a one-sided deal quite often.
Oh.
But the other sport that's really big besides football in getting concussions is soccer. And the thing about soccer is that I think is so important to really kind of grok is that when they're headbutting the balls, I mean, that is
Oh.
really important to realize that after a certain amount of time, what's happening now is that with the headbutting, they're now getting, I almost want to say like bruised spots on the brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, yeah. And the brain itself is the consistency naturally of just raw liver. So your brain is more of a, yeah,
Squishy.
exactly.
Kind of
Squishy.
squishy, spongy.
Yeah, and it has that liver type consistency. And each time you get a concussion or each time something happens, the brain actually begins to feel more and more like cooked liver. And that
Mm.
spot or the spots will feel really hard in the brain matter, seriously hard in the brain matter. So, realizing that.
Now
Okay.
that's really interesting because I can remember because my dad followed boxers, back in the 60s and
Okay.
70s. I remember stories about boxers who'd gotten hit repeatedly and
Right.
it's that cumulative
Yes.
damage. And that's
Yes.
kind of scary to think about, Lee, the damage
Yes.
where your brain goes from being flexible and soft tissue to kind of getting
Harder and
hard and
harder.
flexible. Okay.
And it's just exactly what you said is really important for everyone to remember, not just about concussions, but about everything in the body, is that we are cumulative. So if you have a child, so we'll take it back to concussions now,
Yeah.
is that you will cumulatively injure the brain. And you may, I mean, a lot of times you see the concussions with the throwing up and the dizziness and all that kind of stuff. But what you can also have is a number of injuries over time that don't show up as symptoms until later. So it's like you've added these on top of each other, and then some, and it's weird because it might be something small that then triggers somebody
The tipping
into
point.
exactly their tipping point, into a bunch of into where their symptoms really start showing up. So it's important to understand that. And even in soccer, they have helmets now, but I think they ought to get the head butting out, because that is bad. The balls are hard, it's hitting the head, and it gets harder and harder. The brain gets harder and harder. The tissues, the membranes around them get tighter and tighter on the brain as well.
Wow.
So,
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So
okay.
first of all, I know that, we were talking about symptoms. Some of the symptoms are pretty visible from the beginning, but then you were talking about cumulative. But let's talk instead about prevention, um, or what you do immediately when a concussion has happened. Because I know the goal is prevention. We want to prevent harm, and we want to prevent harm
Right,
for our kids. We want them to
right.
participate and get out there and just have fun. But at the same time, we want to prevent as much as we can. And then what do we do when they have a concussion? What happens next?
So, I mean, the horrible thing is that there's a limited options. I mean, and the medical system, I mean, you want them to rest, right? Right away. If the
Okay.
symptoms are severe enough, if they're going into like really being dizzy, and, I've had it with a child he had had like 14 concussions, and this kid couldn't even go to school. He had to be in a dark room. I mean, he couldn't study, he couldn't think, he could hardly use his eyes. So we
Oh,
had one that was, like that severe.
yeah.
But the here's the sad thing about it is that, and it's sad not because a failing of any kind of system, but really the best way to work on that is to have cranial sacral therapy. Is cranial sacral therapy is directly working on the head, and that someone who actually knows how to work on concussions is the way that I would say that people who's anybody having one, and especially children. You want children's brains to get back to being kind of like
Hmm.
vibrant and all of that. I mean, our brains, we've had a lot, I'm over
Right.
60, it's all going
Right.
on. But, especially, I mean, we'll probably, if I got a concussion now, it would probably show the symptoms sooner, bigger. So with
Hmm.
a child, they'll come out of the symptoms after a day or two, and then you think they're okay. But that concussion area is still
Hmm.
actually on the brain. So don't be fooled if your child is now better and then you send them out to play again and something happens. Then the next time something happens, the symptom will be more intense and it may last longer. So I'm sorry to say that the one way that you can really work with getting concussion, you want to get it off, you want to get it out of the brain. You just don't want to medicate, you really want it out. And the only way I know, and now somebody else may know another way, and I'd love to hear about it, is but another way, the way I know is through cranial sacral, something that literally puts their hands on and helps it and helps the body to actually resolve the concussion.
Yeah, when you were talking about kids and how, they bounce back, and we all know kids are so resilient.
Mm.
They bounce back so quickly, usually. But it's
Right.
really the image I kept having was, we'd started this conversation talking about bruises and how, it's almost like a brain bruise. And, those bruises, the original trauma may be one and done, but then that bruise takes such a long time to heal. So that's one of the things I'm going to take back with me as I'm thinking about concussions, about, it takes a while to heal. Now let's talk a little bit though, specifically
But
about cranial sacral. Yeah.
but can I just say one thing?
Yes, please. Yeah.
When you get the concussion, what you may have is a lessening of the symptoms. You don't have the brain healing necessarily
Yeah.
all the way. So that concussion is still there. It's just not producing symptoms. Okay, so it's not like, oh, a concussion takes a long time to heal, as much as they may come out of the immediate symptoms, but the injury is still there,
Still there. Okay.
still
So
there.
let's talk a little bit about cranial sacral therapy, what that is, what it does. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Cranial sacral therapy is a therapy that's actually was figured out in the late 1880s by an osteopath who figured out that the bones of the head are actually not fused. And then he went on to study that there's the bones, there's layers of membranes, 3 layers of membranes, and then there's the circulation of cerebral spinal fluid. And what he realized, this is kind of a funny story, what he did was, it's kind of appropriate too, is that he wondered if things happen to the bones of our head and to our membranes and stuff, like what difference does that make? So this was the late 1800s. So he put a football helmet on, okay, one of those leathery ones, and he started tightening down parts of it. And what happened is his personality would change. He would get more intense, more angry. And so finally, at one point, his wife put a stop to it. I think that's kind of funny. It was Dr. Sutherland. Yeah, you're done. You're done doing this to yourself. And what he figured out is that your cranial sacral system, it is the system that actually is part of your automatic regulating system, your auto regulation system. So it's kind of interesting. It has come out in the last, because it was strictly osteopaths until the mid 1970s. And in the last 40, 50 years, they're teaching it separately to anybody, to massage therapy, to PTs, to everything. And it is a body of work that, for the most part, but not always, is rather gentle on the head, and that you're working to help free restrictions and patterns that have actually gone in and are in throughout the head, which is why it's so important to do on babies after they've just come through the birth canal, to get rid of any restrictions or torquing, right, for the babies and stuff. So yeah, it's a very powerful it's a powerful body of work. I've been doing it for 30 years, but it's one of the hardest pieces of work to learn. Cranial sacral therapy is one of the hardest bodies of work to learn, but it has the potential is enormous.
Well, it makes sense, Lee, because our brains are vital. They're
Yeah.
vital to everything we
Yes.
do, we think, we feel. They're so important. And I guess really the main thing I want parents and listeners to take away from this is that if your child has a concussion or you have a concussion, don't think just because the next day they're feeling better that we don't have to deal with it. Just remember that
Yes.
effects can be long lasting. There can be cumulative
Yeah.
damage, and it needs to be continuously addressed until it's fully resolved.
Perfect.
Right.
Perfect.
That's what we want people to know. And as our families are going back to school, my granddaughter's going back to school. There's kids all across America, across Oklahoma, and they're going to get whacked. They're just going to get out there with
Yes, they are.
ball or whatever, soccer, the girls playing soccer, the guys headbutting each other. It's going to happen. And we want parents to know, hey, take it seriously. It's a serious issue.
Yeah.
And find somebody who knows about craniosacral therapy. So,
yes. Perfect.
there we go. Now, I want to make sure that our readers know how to get in touch with you. So the Incrum Institute is in Tulsa. It's on, you guys are on Facebook. Also, the website is the Incrum Institute. It's a .com, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, the IncrumInstitute.com.
AncrumInstitute.com. Yes.
So you can reach out there. I know that, you have classes, although I don't think they're open right now. And there's student-led therapy sessions.
There's a student clinic that we have. We'll be
that-
starting a new training in the beginning of next year. So in January, we'll be starting another training. But yes, yeah, we have a student clinic, and we have, on my Facebook page, on my website, there's also a list of Incrum Institute people who have graduated, who are practicing this. So there's more than just me out there.
Okay, so people can go
Definitely.
visit the website, the Incrum Institute, visit the Incrum Institute's Facebook page. Also, with Natural Awakenings, you can find, we'll have links for Lee and the Incrum Institute in the magazine, on our website, and on our Facebook page. We just want to make sure that to get the word out to everybody, to let them know, hey, your brain's important, let's protect them, right?
Let's do it. Okay.
Lee, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's always
you.
nice to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
We will see you again for another conversation with, I'm Shauna Warner with Natural Awakenings Magazine in Oklahoma.